Welcome to Forensic Friday, where I tell you one true crime case that was solved using forensic science, all while doing, that's right, my makeup. Today's video will be featuring the Best Lens palette from a brand called, let me try to pronounce this, girl, because you know I got issues. It's called Wan Kui Hong Feng, and this is an Amazon brand, so this is gonna be very, very interesting. Do you guys see this little like sweat spot on here, or is it just me? Unless the freaking palette is sweating, I have no idea what is going on. I mean, it's possible. We are in California, it's about 90 something degrees right now, so I would not be surprised if the shadows were sweating. I just wanted to say thank you to those of you who went over on Instagram and voted for me. I really appreciate it. You guys are the freaking best, and I just love you so much. I know I'm gonna get some questions about my earrings. I always forget to mention them, and if I ever do, you guys, I'm gonna start putting it in the description below. These are little Goosebumps novels. All the other items I'm using in this video will be linked in the description below. Please read the disclaimer. I am not a professional makeup artist or a professional forensic pathologist. I am just the average girl at home like you, playing makeup and talking about true crime. So if you love true crime and makeup, be sure to hit that subscribe button so you don't miss out on any of my future episodes. And let's get into today's case. Y'all, we gotta turn on the air because I'm gonna melt. This all takes place in Albion, Michigan in 1993, where 18-year-old Rose Larner lived with her family. She was one of 3 children. Rose, she was quite an intelligent girl. However, she had a really troublesome childhood. Her family situation was not the best. It was very, very toxic and abusive, like, living situation. So because of her family circumstances, she spent as little time at home as she possibly could. She was always going out, specifically going out at night, so to the point where her entire family started to nickname her the vampire because they only saw her at night when she would go out. Rose would often hang out with her childhood friend Billy Brown. He was considered one of her best friends, and her boyfriend John Ortiz-Kehoe. Okay. Okay, there's some things I'm not gonna make the joke. Now, according to her friend, her childhood friend, Billy, her and he had been friends since the 4th grade. And actually, at some point when they developed into teenagers, they had like, I don't want to say a thing, because in his interview that he gave, he said that they weren't anything serious, but that they kind of had crushes on each other and that she was his first kiss. Now, John Ortiz-Kehoe was the boyfriend, and he was also friends with Billy. They were also friends from childhood as well. John Ortiz-Kehoe, he was actually pretty popular in the neighborhood. He was very well known. He was like a local rapper or music artist, but in their neighborhood, he was very well known. And Rose's mother describes him as a very nice guy. She said that she did trust him. She didn't feel like there was anything wrong with him. She spent a lot of her time out with Billy and John because those were like her 2 closest people. At some point, her and John Kehoe actually ended up moving in together, but their relationship did not last. Of course, she's a teenager, and John Kehoe ended up moving out. And when he moved out, of course, Rose was devastated. So on December 7th, 1993, Rose was heading to her friend Keith's house. I believe this was like a new guy that she had started seeing after her and John broke up. On her way to see her friend, she had stopped at her mother's place of work, which was this local convenience store, and she told her mom that she was going to go see her friend Keith. Her mom says that she did not have a good feeling about that night, and she actually told Rose like, hey, you should go back and get the car. Like, I don't something feels weird. I don't have a good feeling about tonight. And she said Rose did not want to do that. She was like, no, Mom, like, I'm just going to my friend's house. I'm not going back. I don't want to go back to get the car. So they said their goodbyes and Rose headed towards her friend Keith's house. But the next day, Rose never returned home. So her mom starts making phone calls. You know, she dialing everybody up like a mom would do, like, where's my child? And the first person she calls is Keith, because Keith is her current boyfriend and he would have been the last one to see her since she said that she was heading over to Keith's house. However, Keith tells her mother that she never showed up. And Rose did not show up for work the next day either. Because she was considered somewhat of a troubled child and she did not have a good lifestyle at home, like a good home life, police thought that it would not be like out of the ordinary for her to want to run away, for her to try to run away. She was always going where she wanted to go anyway and kind of just doing whatever she wanted to do, and no one was really watching her that much. Also, what police found while investigating her disappearance was that Rose made about 1,500 telephone calls a month, and no one had heard from her after her disappearance. Like, she hadn't made one single phone call. So police knew that something was really weird about this. In fact, the lead investigator on the case told Rose's mom, like, listen, this is not normal. Like, no one would ever, someone who makes that amount of phone calls a month would not just stop making phone calls altogether. Like, it's definitely out of the ordinary. So 2 weeks go by and no one hears from Rose. She is still missing. No one's found her. They haven't heard from her, nothing. And so Lansing police started this huge search for her. They had cadaver dogs, they had ground searches, aerial searches. I mean, they were searching the entire area looking for some clue to where Rosie could be. They had divers to go into the rivers. They had a search team to go through all of the neighborhoods and local wooded areas looking for her. I mean, this search was so massive. It was the biggest search that Lansing police had undertaken in central Michigan. During their investigation, police received numerous tips. Actually, people would call in and say Rosie is in so-and-so's backyard, or she's in so-and-so's backyard, and the police actually followed up on every single tip. They would go to these different houses. They dug up multiple backyards and gravel pits. But those leads, however, didn't turn up anything until they got a tip that Rosie had actually spoken to her ex-boyfriend, John Ortiz-Kehoe, the night that she had disappeared. So police started to look into Kehoe. John Kehoe had an alibi for that night, and according to Billy, he was also on that date with John Kehoe with his date as well. So these two dudes are claiming that they were out together that night on a date, and that they hadn't seen her. Since they were together, they corroborated each other's alibi. I just had to put a crap ton of concealer because, baby, you're a firework. So for the next 2.5 years, police could find no trace of Rose. Like, they didn't get anything, any clues, any new leads, nothing. It was like she had disappeared into thin air. So the state came in and they began their investigation with a fresh new look at Rose's ex-boyfriend, John Kehoe. They believed that he had something to do with this case, so they decided to take another look at him. While they were looking into John Kehoe, they found out that Rose and John had an unusual relationship that had continued well after they had broken up. One night, Rose had driven to a fraternity house that John was at with another woman. He was on a date because they were broken up, girl. Like, you were broken up. And she, in a fit of anger, ran her truck into the side, ran her van, I think it was her van, her car, whatever, into the side of his truck. Now, according to Bill, or Billy, whatever we want to call him, she was smashing her mom's van into the side of John's truck, and she was busting out his windows. When they showed up, they tried to stop her. Also, according to Bill, she was stalking John. They would come home and they would see her hiding behind trees at their house. A further look into John Kehoe and Billy Brown, police found that they actually were in business together. They were in the drug business together, and they had customers all across Michigan. So these were some pretty dangerous friends that Rosie had. So they started to put a lot of pressure on Billy Brown. They were talking to his family, they were talking to his, friends, associates, everyone around Bill. Now, while police did believe that Bill and John were together on the night that Rosie had disappeared, they didn't believe that Billy Brown was telling them all of what had taken place that night. So they started to press him harder. I think they just saw him as much more of a weaker link than Kehoe was, and they felt like they could probably get more information out of him. So Bill Brown said that he knew the only way police would have any sort of case or get any help was if someone started talking, because he knew that they didn't have enough evidence. He took this as his opportunity to speak up first, to get ahead of things. So Bill Brown originally told police that he knew nothing about what happened to Rose, but 2.5 years later, and with constant police pressure, he had changed his story. And you guys, the story was so just shocking and crazy that the police at first didn't know whether they should believe him or not. I think some of the policemen said that they had gone home, and on their way home after interviewing him, they almost stopped in like a church to pray because they were convinced they had met the devil. And I think one of the lead investigators on the case actually told his wife when he got home, like, I think I actually met the devil today. So now that they had this confession from Billy Brown, they needed forensic science to tell if he was telling the truth. So according to Brown, he had unexpectedly run into Rose Larner at the convenience store on December 7th. He says that Rose wanted to see John Kehoe, and she was begging him to page John. So he pages John, and John says that he'll only agree to meet with them if Rose will agree to have a threesome with him and Billy. According to Billy, she agrees to do this threesome so that she can see John. Now, this is where I'm kind of iffy about the story that Billy told. So he says that Rose agreed, and they drove to John Kehoe's grandparents' house. That his grandparents was on vacation for the weekend, and so they had a cabin or something like that, I believe. When they got there, according to Billy, they decided to get in the shower, and everything was going well. They're all in the shower together. That is when John sort of tried to introduce the idea hey, we're going to try to initiate the threesome. And when he did this, Rose was like, hey, no. Rose changed her mind. She did not want to do the threesome at this point. According to Billy, he gets out of the shower and leaves John and her in the shower, and eventually they all come out of the shower. He and Rose are at the sink, freshening up. She's doing her hair, drying her hair, and they're drying off. According to Billy, this is when John Kehoe comes up behind Rosie and starts to strangle her. John murdered Rosie and dismembered her body, and he and John both cleaned up the house after it. He claims that he didn't do anything out of fear for his own life, that he was just scared and he just wanted to the only thing he could think about was you know, cleaning up the crime scene, getting rid of this body, doing whatever John told him, and just staying safe, like worrying about his own butt, not getting in trouble. I don't know. Something about it just doesn't sit right with me. Even when I was watching the interview, he seems pretty credible, but there's just something in me that just feels like what he's saying is not entirely accurate. Later, they drove to a cabin owned by Bill Brown's parents that was in the woods, and they took Rosie's body's parts and burned them in a bonfire. Once her body had completely burned down, they took the ashes, and on their way driving back home, they poured her ashes along a Michigan highway. It's difficult for me to even say. And Bill, in his interview, describes the night that he was, you know, pouring out her ashes along the highway, and he says that honestly he said a little prayer. Even though he's not religious, he said a little prayer for her, and at that point he didn't think about it again. He was just thinking about keeping himself safe and making sure nothing happened to him. I'm just like, hold on, you this is what like really disturbs me, is these types of cases when we have people who have known each other for years, like almost lifetimes, literally. According to Bill, he hadn't come forward to police sooner because he was afraid that John Kehoe would murder him too, and that's the reason why he kept quiet. He said that after the murder had happened, that he pretty much became a hostage to John. That is how he explains their relationship after that he was more like a hostage, and that John kept an eye on him and always knew where he was. They were always pretty much together, and they kind of stayed tight. So this was the break in the case that police were looking for, but they needed more evidence. They needed to know that he was telling the truth, because he really wasn't a credible person. He sold drugs for a living. He ran around with a lot of the wrong crowds and people, and so since Brown had told police that Rose was murdered in the bathroom, police sprayed luminol in the areas of the bathroom. Luminol is a chemical that can reveal trace amounts of blood even after it has been cleaned up with water and detergent, but they found nothing in the bathroom. However, in the hallway, luminol revealed an imprint in the carpet that seemed to be the bottom of a bloody bucket. But since it had been 2.5 years, there was not enough blood to perform DNA testing. So at this point, investigators started to fear that they were at a dead end, until they noticed a small spot of blood on the hallway wallpaper. It was right outside the bathroom, as well as the shape of blood that would be consistent with a blood splatter. Initially, police did not recognize that stain as a blood splatter because it kind of blended in with the pattern of the wallpaper. To see if the pattern was blood, forensic scientists performed a phenolphthalein test. Now it's time to go into the palette, but anyway, back to the story. So the first thing forensic scientists did was to run a wet Q-tip over the spot. Then they added phenolphthalein and hydrogen peroxide to the Q-tip, and the Q-tip turned pink. This is a positive indicator for blood. So keep in mind, at this point, you guys, they don't have a body, so they don't have like any blood or any DNA evidence to compare this droplet of blood that they found. However, while they were doing their investigation, police found out that Rose Larner had actually been about 2 years prior, and it was reported. Her blood sample was taken and still in police custody. When police compared the DNA from the wallpaper to Rose Larner's DNA sample from that, what do you know? The blood on the wallpaper was that in fact Rose Larner's. In fact, the odds of the blood belonging to anyone else was 1 in 747 million. Well, that's a lot. Police at this point were ecstatic because they finally had the evidence they needed to corroborate Bill Brown's story. This put Rose Larner in the house that night. They used the basement sink to clean up the mess they had made. That is where they wrung out the towels that they used to clean up the blood, and just like some of the other things that they used to clean up, they rinsed them off down there. So police took a look into the basement sink's drain. They also excavated the fire pit near Bill Brown's parents' place, where Bill Brown alleged that Rose's body had been burned. The fragments were taken in to the forensics lab and examined to see if they were actual bones or just something else. Okay, this is not turning out how I imagine. I look like the Phantom of the Opera. If the fragments turned out to be bones, then under the ultraviolet light, it would glow. Now, the bone fragments were very, very tiny. So like, I believe one of the forensic scientists described it as none of them were bigger than the size of a pea. So these were pretty small fragments. So initially the bones were too burned to get any DNA testing from. However, they were sent out to another analyst to test if the bones were human or not. Investigators are thinking, okay, we can't do a DNA test, so we can't just like go straight there. We at least need to find out if these are human remains or animal remains. Human bones are circular in shape and animal bones are more linear, more like a tube. They found that the bones from both sites was that in fact human remains. I mean, that's pretty, but what the hell happened to everything else? The number of circular osteons in bones increased with age, and there weren't that many osteons in these bone chips. So they were able to determine that the age of the human remains were in their teens, which would be obviously the age of Rosie. So because police found the blood and the bone chips exactly where Bill Brown said that they would be, they were now convinced that Rose Larner had been murdered. And he's probably exonerated for giving that testimony, honestly. So now investigators had the blood in the sub pump, the luminol impression of the bloody bucket, as well as the blood droplet on the wall, and the bone fragments found in the fire pit all confirmed Brown's story. So this was enough evidence to go ahead and arrest John Kehoe. Unfortunately, before they could arrest him, John Kehoe fled the country. Police finally located him. He was in Mexico at a bar drinking a beer when he was arrested. At the trial, John Kehoe's defense was that Bill Brown was the one who had murdered Rose Larner and not him. According to John Kehoe, he was just like, hey, I didn't do it. I was just there and Bill killed my ex-girlfriend. Like, I forgot to mention this as well. According to John, he says that Bill was high on coke. So yeah, he said that Bill was all coked out and he kind of went crazy and attacked Rose because Rose wouldn't have sex with him. So these boys were pretty much trying to pin it on each other, which it's like, in this case, who do you believe? Who do you trust? Let me know in the comments down below. I don't feel that Bill is telling the entire truth. I just think that he was the lucky one because he got to the police first, so he was able to get his narrative out there first for police to kind of run with. I just feel like they both should go to jail. Go straight to jail. Do not pass go. Do not collect $200. Straight to jail. Here she is. Here's Lucy. Detective Inspector Lucy has joined us tonight, and she left me with a present, a giant fur ball in my lap. Now, even though John's argument was that Bill was the one who had done this, the prosecutors argued that Bill had no motive to actually kill Rose Larner. However, they felt that John Kehoe did because she had been causing him all these problems. They had broken up. He was trying to move on. Rose was getting on his nerves. The jury deliberated just over an hour. Thanks to forensic science and some good police work, John Ortiz-Kehoe was convicted of first-degree premeditated murder. He was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Bill Brown was sentenced to 1 year in prison for helping cover up the murder. At the time the story was published, he was on parole. He is now a free man. Bullshit! Excuse me, guys. But that's absolute BS. Absolute BS. You guys, there is so much more to this case that actually recently came out in the last year. I believe in December of 2020, John Ortiz-Kehoe was granted a new hearing. The hearing was to discuss his original child and what he believed was an illegal impaneled grand jury. Even though the hearing in the circuit court was granted, the hearing was delayed indefinitely due to COVID-19. Isn't that some crazy balls right there? One dude got off with just a year and the other dude is trying to get set free. What did you guys think about this case and my makeup look? Please let me know in the comments down below. If you like videos like these, check out my last episode. I'll leave a link on the screen right here or right here. Hopefully it pops up because it never does because YouTube is too freaking slow. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you guys next week with another Forensic Friday episode, or Saturday or Sunday, who knows. Bye!